So, welcome everybody to episode 140 today of Level Up. Who would have thought it? 60 minutes of live Q&A where your questions really do drive the show. We have online our social team, Adriana and Ella. They're over there in the chat. So please do introduce yourselves to them. Let them know your name, please, and the city from where you're joining. They are going to post links into the chat for you to vote up the questions that you would most like answered. And of course, for you to be able to add your own. Now then, if your question is selected, then your name's going to appear in the credits at the end of the show. So do get your questions in early and stay with us to see all of that taking place. Today, we're going to be asking questions around careers in the field of public-private partnerships. I think it's fair to say that APMG has been at the epicenter of building competency and capability around the world in what good looks like for more than 10 years now. And I'm delighted to be rejoined today by some experts who make up our panel and really help us to explore the topic. So let's jump in and meet them again, because there's some familiar faces to you all. Let me begin with Abhaya. Abhaya Agarwal is the partner for strategy and transactions over with EY in India, where he has developed a number of marquee infrastructure projects across many countries, including things like water supply and sanitation and so on, health, education, to name but a few. He's an accomplished advisor with a really strong track record. So welcome back to the panel, Abhaya. Really lovely to see you again. Unfortunately, though, we can't hear you. So I think you may be on mute at the moment. It can happen from time to time. Okay, so we'll come back to Abhaya in a moment, and we'll move on. Nyananso Ekanem is managing consultant with Weircapacity over in Nigeria, who focuses on ensuring that their clients receive the very best advice and counsel. With a growing client list, the team is growing quickly whilst maintaining their core values of excellence in everything that they do. Welcome back to Level Up, Nyananso. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much, Nick, and good to be back here. Hoping that we'll have a very interesting session. PPP has gone around the world. It's something people are, gearing up to, and so some people want to be specialists. So this session should be very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining today. Sergei Samolis is, of course, the CEO over at PPP Expertise Eurasia, who are an independent provider of consulting and training services in public-private partnerships, with a background himself in PPPs and project finance in particular. Sergei and his team elevate their client capability through their service delivery. So welcome back. Lovely to see you again as well, Sergei. Great to see you.
Hello, Nick. Great to see you. Great to see everyone of the panelists. I'm looking forward to the show.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Amandeep Singh Virk, of course, is a leading international PPP transaction advisor himself, who's currently working over at the World Bank with a passion, I think it's fair to say, I hope, for sustainable development. Amandeep champions a pro-people approach to PPP interventions. And welcome back to the panel, Amandeep. It's like old times. This friendship group has come back again, which is really lovely to see. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Nick. And pleased to be back on this episode. Hope to have a good session on this PPPs. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Very good. So let's just try Abhaya's microphone one more time. Can you hear us now? And I'm hoping that we can hear you. And we can't. Okay. All right. Well, we'll try and fix that in the background while we move on. Completing our in-camera team for today is our question master, who is Charlotte, I think, and she is joining from a different part of the UK today. So I don't recognise your background today, Charlotte. So whereabouts in the world are you?
So I'm joining from Yorkshire and the sort of north of England. The sun is shining, skies are blue, so I cannot ask for anything more.
Okay, all right, okay. Very good indeed. Well, on that note, I can see that we already have quite a lot of activity, lots of people joining over on social media, so we're going to reference them in a few minutes. But let's jump straight into it, if we can do, and we'll take our first question for the panel.
Thanks, Nick. So the first question is from Theo Gratius. What is the role of a public-private partnership in building sustainable public investment in developing countries?
Okay, so we've started off straight away, the role around sustainability. Amandeep, brilliant. Yeah, if you could start us off on this would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so PPP has a very great role in sustainable development. If you see, the PPP has 4 stages. First, right from the creating a regulatory framework, identifying the right project, and then structuring it, taking to the transaction, and then manage it. But at each and every stage, we can fix or we can support the sustainability infrastructure right from the regulatory. If regulations are there to look at the climate change aspects, etc., that helps a lot. Then moving to, for example, identify the project. So identification of project is very, very important. And there itself, sustainable public investment can be looked at, and there are tools. For example, World Bank has created a tool, PSET tool, PPP screening tool. That tool will help in identify the sustainable projects. And then when structuring, what kind of investment, how to take care of the sustainable aspects, both environment and climate, and then financing. From the financing part, we know these days, financing PPP or project is very difficult if project is not sustainable, or it's emitting some GHG emissions. So it's very difficult to sustain. So that's where the whole world is coming to help sustainable. So that PPP has a great role in building sustainable infrastructures in all over the world, not only the developing countries. Thank you.
I think you're right. It's quite interesting as well, isn't it? How sustainability at one time, not so long ago, was at the periphery of taking decisions for investment. And increasingly, I see sustainability coming into the center ground, more embedded, if you like, in that decision-making process. Amandeep, is that something that you're witnessing as well, or is it just my non-expert perception? Are the spin doctors managing my perception better, perhaps?
No, Nick, you're absolutely right. So that's the reason why I was explaining each stage, that each stage, right from the multilateral development banks to the lenders to the governments, are focusing on sustainable development. For example, the last phase of the project PPP, which is contract management. Now that is always have a backseat within the governments, especially from the sustainability point of view. Now, the government, especially the MDBs, multilateral development banks, I'm a part of the team of the World Bank. We have created a new tool, contract management tool, having focus purely on climate and sustainability of the projects, so that when you manage the contract and the PPP, it takes care of the sustainability. So you're absolutely right. Its focus is quite right now at the moment at every stage from every corner.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. It is fascinating to kind of see that transformational journey kind of happening in front of us. Very good. So let's go back to the panel then, and we're going to move on and we'll take our next question while we're doing a little bit of troubleshooting to remove some of the technical gremlins. Charlotte, if you can do, let's take our second question to the panel now.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Theo Papadopoulos. Is it true that most countries do not have sufficient transaction advisory or public-private partnerships contract management capacitated professionals?
Getting this capability and capacity right, and I suppose capability is that blend of skills, knowledge, but also the capacity to be able to execute is such an important thing. Nyananso, what's your experience? Are we still trying to skill up, staff up, and kind of build up? So we'll hear from you, and then we'll go to Amandeep.
Okay, so point blank, PPP is something new in quite a number of environments. So in terms of understanding the concept and practice of public-private partnership, it is true that a number of countries do not have the capacity, and that's why the APMG program, CP3P certification program, is quite important for countries to adapt and also get people on that curriculum so they can understand the process, but also in-depth appreciation of PPPs using that certification program. Now, beyond just transaction, contract management has been mentioned earlier, but also is the most important aspect for PPPs because that's where value is actually delivered. So you can have a very good transaction where you close out and everybody starts working, but that's when you really need a strong team to manage the contract, because at contract management stage is where you achieve value, where you can actually achieve what was expected in terms of delivering the services and also meeting the service levels that was agreed with all parties. So that is true. Some countries are struggling in terms of capacity, but a number of countries are actually building capacity right now, but not just the human knowledge, but institutional capacity to be able to, using tools and processes that will put them on the right track to be able to manage contracts. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's often the case, isn't it, where to achieve that kind of capability, to move up that sort of scale of the ability to execute, it's not just human resource. It's also those processes and that value chain and being able to get the governance and the management and all of that lifted up together kind of thing. So I think you're absolutely right. Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's go to Amandeep next, and then we'll hear from Sergei.
Yeah, so absolutely. So basically, we all know the PPP is a complex animal, right? So most of the developing world is, not having sufficient capacity, both in structuring the projects and how taking the project at different phase. So one thing the guys who are getting into PPP need to understand, PPP is not a miracle. It's simply another tool of procuring an infrastructure asset or service, right? So now it can do wonders only and only if at each and every stage, right from identifying the good project to contract management, every stage we do right thing. So that's where the expertise comes into. That's where, and it becomes more complex because it's done through a project financing rather than the corporate financing. So it becomes more complex. So that's the reason capacity building, both at the government level, at the private sector consultant level, that need to be. And when it touches the contract management, both developed and developing world are lacking. It's very difficult. We build the infrastructure and then the contract management is always taken backstage, which need to be taken care of while we do the PPPs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. It's so important, isn't it, that it's a baton which is passed along that value chain and not simply, we're refining this sector or section or phase, if you like, but we don't have that capability to continue the good work. Sergei, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Abhaya.
I'm not sure if I have any data on how complete individual countries are with transaction advisory capacity. What we see a lot in the developing economies that we work with, there's usually a deficit of PPP professionals. But I could think of, let's say, UK, where I am, probably there's much more transaction advisors than PPP projects at the moment. So there is probably abundance of experience in the UK. But due to the large size of the PPP deals, very often they're international. So it's quite rare, I would say, that a PPP deal would only be covered by local experts, even if expertise is abundant. Your investors may be international, your consultants could be transnational companies. And I really like the second element of this question as well. In terms of contract management as a phase, it is sometimes underestimated, and the importance of this phase. And we see a lot of transactions in the developing countries when public authority would have support of international financial institutions, very good transaction teams, helping develop the project, take it to procurement, to commercial financial close. That's where their mandate typically ends. And then there is the public sector team with its capacity to manage the contract. And that's where sometimes the bottleneck is. And that's some of the countries that we were operating, they realize that, and they are trying to upgrade their capacity at the contract management phase.
Yeah, I agree with that, because and it's actually part of the attraction, I think, of working in the space. Few people set out to become a PPP specialist from leaving university. Most people are coming into it because they start to gain some experience. They're interested in better outcomes for citizens. They're interested in better projects. They're interested in, better legal frameworks, better contracts, better finance instruments, and so on. So all of these things kind of bring talent into a core team, and that talent can be sourced from all over the world. So it's a really, really important, I think, dynamic that, ironically, that perhaps you're better off in a way if there are some key gaps, and you fulfill those gaps by having people from outside of your immediate geography. But at the same time, if there's too much of a gulf, you can feel disenfranchised somehow, I think, sometimes. So it's a balance. Very good. Thank you so much indeed, Sergei. Abhaya, I'm hoping now that we can hear you clearly. What are your thoughts on the capacity to be able to execute?
So I think a lot of things have been added on that issue, but one very important thing is what we saw in terms of statistics is about 8 to 10 years. Overall number of PPPs are stagnant, not really moving. So the demand for professional also has to be seen in that light. And second thing is that the developed countries are having more PPPs within those stagnant number, and underdeveloped countries or developing countries are actually reducing number of PPPs. So this dimension, if you see, I think there is an issue that definitely in terms of developing countries will have more severe problem of capacity and professionals, because demands are also not there. So and people respond to the demand. So this is another dimension which I just wanted to add.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much, panel. Oh, what a great question. Our second question, we've had two really fascinating questions, actually, to kind of start us off. So thank you so much, Theo. Now then, I'm just going to refer over to our social feed that we have kind of running at the moment, and pick out some names and faces that we have heard from previously. Joe, welcome to you. You're joining from London, so really good to have you on the call. And Nafeez Nasir, who's joining. I can't quite pick out where you are joining from, actually, Nafeez. So it'd be really great if you could update the social chat with just the city of your location. We don't need your your absolute location, if you like. Andrew is online as well. Thank you so much, Andrew, from Kenya. Really good to have you on board today, my friend, and I know a regular contributor from our audience. So thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And I think also we can hear, Stefan Brendel as well, from APMG, of course, and a regular panelist on Level Up, is joining us from the city of Vaals. I think it's a city anyway, in the southern area of the Netherlands today. And of course, Roy is joining us from Nigeria, from Maiduguri. In Nigeria specifically. So really good to have you online as well. So we're looking forward to you guys who are out there online in the audience putting in your questions. Just type them into the social chat. We'll pick them up from there. Adriana and Ella will, and they'll bring them into the show and put them to the panel for you. In the meantime, Charlotte, let's press on if we can, and we'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. I think this is a question from a previous panelist, Falco Werner. How much is public-private partnership used in different parts of the world?
Well, Falco, yeah, he's quite an interesting character, and he's been on a number of the Level Up shows. So he's very good at constructing a question which, on the one hand, sounds very straightforward, and then we start thinking about it, and you think, okay, well, how long is a piece of string? Amandeep, start us off, and then we'll hear from Abhaya.
Yeah, the straightway answer is everywhere in the world. Every country is looking for PPP. So every developed world has different incentive, and the developing world has a different incentive to do PPPs. So developing world do because of the constraint in the resources, developed world does to get innovation, to get performance, etc. Although developing world also, but main motivation is the constraints in resources. So every country, so even there are most of the countries who has framework in place, PPP framework, right? And there are many countries who are currently preparing the PPP framework to take it through. So because that's the only way economies see how to grow, how to develop. Otherwise, the current resources cannot be leveraged. So PPP is the one which can leverage whatever the minimum resources or the limited resources our country do have. Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. And Abhaya?
Yeah. So while I agree with Amandeep in terms of PPPs used across the world and all the countries, but I think if you see many countries who do not have very developed framework and organizational structure in terms of handling PPPs or even developed thinking, etc., I think there is more discussions and announcements than real PPPs which are happening. Developed countries, on the other hand, they are doing more performance-based and PPPs, and so the phase where they were actually not doing PPP is over. They have started doing a lot of PPPs again. But countries like India or Bangladesh or Pakistan, I think the focus of World Bank and ADB and also the countries to focus on more quick wins in terms of health, education, agriculture, warehousing, which is not very high in investment and where services are very important. So this is a good shift, but I will not say that in terms of investment, there is substantial investment which is coming from PPPs in developing countries. And it's about using services of private sector.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. I do think that we tend to, as non-specialists, we tend to notice infrastructure, public-private partnerships, perhaps a little bit more readily than the service-led ones, and yet the service-led ones change outcome for citizens potentially at a faster rate, or they can impact a larger community of people, perhaps. So they might not have the flagship moment of cutting the ribbon and kind of being the first person to drive across the new, very beautiful bridge, or to ride the railway train at high speed, or, whatever it happens to be, or to have the new electricity plant generating and, switching on, new power capability. But nonetheless, they do influence people's lives and they make a real difference. So service-led public-private partnerships are a fascinating area, I think, to be able to deliver those better outcomes, and to also, importantly, of course, meet the needs of both the private investors, the partners who are shaping them and delivering those projects, and indeed the government sponsors who are involved as well. So very good, very interesting. Thank you so much. Charlotte, if we can, let's move on. We'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. The next question from, excuse the pronunciation, Eno Obong Samson. Is the concept of a public-private partnership applicable in other sectors besides infrastructure? If yes, please could you give an example of a sector and how it can be applied?
I honestly want to tell everybody that's watching, I don't see the order of the questions. All right, none of the panel actually do. The question order is being chosen by the question master, who is today Charlotte. So I didn't see this one coming next. So okay, well, thank you very much. So great question. What are these other kind of sectors then beyond infrastructure? So I've mentioned some, kind of hinting, I suppose, at healthcare and, the primary healthcare particularly. Abhaya, you've worked in many different PPPs. Bring to life a couple of them for us.
Yeah, so telehealth, vast countries where people live in villages, they don't have access to large hospitals. What India has been able to do is to have a backup office where a lot of doctors are there, and you have remote locations where there is may not be proper doctor but a certified physician who can take all the vitals through telemedicine, etc., convey it on the phone or through the digital media to the backup office, where they can see and they can also prescribe either medicines or to the next level where he should go. Tremendous benefit, tremendous services being delivered to the bottom of the people. Same thing is, vaccine development, vaccine distribution. In terms of agriculture, you are talking about silos to be built on PPPs, where private sector also goes out, buys the wheat or rice or other things and stores it, and then releases it in the non-peak season so that the volumes can be stabilized and the price can be stabilized. So there are examples and examples. Schools you have enough in UK and Australia, but they are performance based. But there are also schools where the private sector actually takes over existing schools and then delivers a better outcome, or uses the existing teacher in the same school and trains them and get the better result out of the students. So I think the focus is how to use existing infrastructure, existing manpower first, and deliver better outcomes, and then go out and maybe build infrastructure also, and then give services. So in terms of ROI, it's tremendous.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, thank you. And we'll come back to considering kind of value and that return in a little while. Nyananso, your thoughts on this, please.
So that's a very interesting question. But I think we need to understand that infrastructure is at the foundation of service. So whether it's a public service or a private service, infrastructure is at the foundation. And so we can come up with either health services or education services that don't require huge infrastructure, because technology has actually changed the game in terms of delivering services. So for instance, where I've seen a PPP that doesn't require building an asset, maybe a school, but a private entity is working with the government to provide lessons through internet for students. And so all the students need is just a computer to connect to these lesson modules, and they're getting all the students, through all their curriculum. And so the private entity is also, building the assessment program, and these students can be scored and they can pass the exams, all done using technology, and no school built and nothing built. So no infrastructure, but the foundation of that process happening has to be the fiber optics, or the internet service that you have access to.
Right.
So there's infrastructure somewhere, but whether it's telemedicine or everything, it has to be based on an infrastructure foundational support. But with technology, things have changed significantly, where you can deliver services without having to build the asset side. And let's not also forget there's the infrastructure PPP, but also the service PPP. The service PPP is where I think the question is mainly around. You don't have to build the infrastructure. You can actually come in to deliver service PPPs on an existing infrastructure and to deliver service and meeting expected value for the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sergei, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the way I read this question from Inobong, I probably take a bit different perspective. I thought the question is after not comparing the asset versus service, but looking at the sectors. So if PPPs can go beyond transport infrastructure and social infrastructure, which are typically where PPPs are used. And yes, we do see a lot of projects in the geographies that are familiar to us, in agriculture, sometimes in industry, machine building, and some other areas which are not typically, not your transport or social infrastructure or service. And in some of the countries, like some of the Central Asian countries, we recently analyzed legislation, and it's even seen as a weak point of legislation, where there is no very strict definition of what kind of sectors can be used for PPPs. So there is this, because PPP legislation in many of those countries is more advanced, more comfortable to apply than the public procurement one. So very often there is the tendency to use PPP for any kind of interaction between public and private. even if there is no obvious case of the public responsibility to the population for a certain service, things like public baths or gas stations, which could be totally private sector projects, but sometimes PPPs are used for those. It's a very interesting, debatable point whether this spread of PPP as a contractual vehicle for contracts is good, or it should be rather limited to areas where the government is responsible for public infrastructure.
And it's very important, isn't it? Because I think we, all of us, have witnessed not just PPP projects, but flagship projects that have failed to deliver one way or another. Okay, so that kind of haunts us, and I think sometimes that the popular press has focused on the PPP, the vehicle, rather than actually asking the fundamental questions about the project. It was, it may have always been, challenging to deliver, regardless of the way in which it was brought together. And it tends to be PPP as a vehicle, like, oh, well, this PPP project didn't deliver, therefore all, can't deliver, and so on. And of course, it's much easier to talk about challenges than it is to celebrate successes. So I totally agree with that. Thank you very much indeed, panel. And what a great question as well to have put to us. So let's head over to social, if we can then, and see who else we can welcome into the event today from the audience. I know that we've got quite a lot of folks from around the world. Salia, great to see you online from Sri Lanka. So lovely to have you with us actually today. Must be evening time, I guess, for you by now. So thank you for giving up some of your Friday evening. It's really brilliant to have you online. And moving on, let's look at Wandimo, who is a regular contributor, of course, in the audience. So we'll look forward to some questions coming in from Wandimo, hopefully, in the next few minutes. Good to have you joining us from Ethiopia, and Gabriel as well. Gabriel Menkin there, I think it is. Sorry, Menkiti. I couldn't quite read your name. Had to really focus there for a moment. Maybe I'm due back at the opticians very soon. There's a thought, isn't there? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on, Charlotte. If we can, we'll take our next question.
Thanks, Nick. And I'm hoping this doesn't surprise the panel too much this time. It is a live question that's been submitted by one of our live viewers, Hamid Awad. How do you enforce the alignment of the PPP projects with the public interest and benefit, especially in low-income countries?
All right. So I think this is about let's make sure that we're heading out in the right direction here. Now, this is a key role for advisors, isn't it, to try and bring these different stakeholder requirements together early on and keep everybody kind of focused on the right sort of outcome. Abhaya, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Amandeep.
I think the first thing is to kind of really articulate what are the alignments, what are the public interest and benefit, how to measure them, and who will measure them. And if it is independent measurement, which is credible, even better. And then many low-income countries, etc., I think the enforcement is a problem, even if they are not achieving the interest and benefit for which the project was given. So enforcement will also be very important. However, the important point is that articulation and then measurement.
Thank you very much indeed. And Amandeep, your thoughts?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, PPP is about, it is not only to just develop infrastructure or services, it's about looking at the benefits, what it achieves for the public or the public interest. So that's where, especially where the projects are supported by the multilateral development plans or the IFIs, the community engagement, the stakeholder consultation is a very, very key pillar of developing a PPP right from beginning. Doing the business case. So you have to identify who are the stakeholders, including the community. Earlier, it was only left to the few major stakeholders. But now the things are boiling down to going to the community level, and that too repetitively. At each stage, you have a kind of a pre-feasibility go there, that okay, we are going to do this project. What are your interests? Whether these can be incorporated into, when you final structure it, go back again. So it is not a one-time job. So go back again, and before going to to the procurement, again go again. So it's an iterative process which is being advocated by the MDBs. That's where the public interest and benefits, which is going to the grassroots level, how the PPP can help that. That's where we call it pro people PPP. Yeah. So that's very important. For example, we were talking about the health services or health PPP project, whether it's a hospital. Now, one way of doing the PPP is keep the all the procedural fee at a market level. So allow private sector to whatever the fee charges for the any kind of procedure, whether it's a cardiac procedure or any neurology procedure, etc. Another way is you are going to benefit to the poor people of your country. So fix the prices and then structure the project in a way that private sector also earns it or have a better, good return from the projects. That's where you can, serve the public. Diagnostic center, radiology diagnostic centers everywhere in the developing countries. There's a big hand and glove between the doctors and diagnostic centers. 40 to 60% cut, which is going to a doctors who is suffering, the normal poor patient. So if you can do PPP in such a fashion that create a volume game for the private sector and then fix the price, the floor of the services for the public, that benefits the public, and then accordingly do the PPP in a better fashion. That's where different ways to watch out the public interest.
I think that's so important, and that volume, consideration is critical, especially in healthcare. When we look at the cost at the point of use for even basic medications, they vary so much in different countries, and so much of that is to do with this volume approach. If you take a national approach, if you take a volume purchasing approach, then you're able to deliver a greater degree of affordability, whilst you have at the same time the private sector actually working and being profitable as part of that ecosystem. What I'd like to do, I'd like to bring in Sergei, if I can, TD at this point, and hear from him, and then we'll hear from Nyananso.
Yeah, just as a brief comment, just to pick up on one specific word that Amandeep used, the business cases. Indeed, the alignment with public interest and benefit should be captured very early in the development of the project, and the structure of a good business case starts with a strategic business case before it goes to one of the 5 business cases, before you go to the economic, financial, management one, and so on. It all starts at the project identification and screening stage, with making sure that the project is aligned with the interest of this public, and it's environmentally friendly, meets the ESG criteria, and so on. And actually, a lot of it is captured in the APMG's certified PPP professional credential, but there's also a new one on infrastructure business cases, which stems from the UK experience and 5 business cases that all of the major projects in the UK are being developed. So that's also a good framework to consider if you want to make sure that you capture this aspect without fail.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll try and get those links out and available, and make sure that they're posted into the social chat for people to be able to pick up. Nyananso, final thoughts on this question, please.
Okay, so this takes us to contract management, because I think when you're developing, at the transaction stage, when you're developing all the business case and defining expectations and making sure you're going to meet those expectations, at the contract management stage is where, the word enforce comes to play. So the question is around enforcing the alignment, because you can have a very well-defined plan to make sure you align with public interest, but at contract management is not aligned. How are you going to enforce that? And so that's the value PPPs bring us for low-income economies. Institutions have to be ready to meet expectations. And so not just the procuring authority, but also other institutions in the country that are responsible for either enforcing alignment or legal issues. So your legal framework, what happens in a PPP, all the institutions can live up to expectation. And for instance, the question sustainable public investment, the public authorities plan for long term, not annual.
Okay, all right. So I think we've got a few little connection kind of gremlins coming in from Nyananso. So just while he sorts that out and reconnects into the session, I'm going to pick up a couple of those things, because I think the legal frameworks have developed a great deal now in many countries, and you're having now a more comprehensive set of rules that are being brought in by legislators in each country in order to ensure, if you like, guarantee underwrite in some fashion, compliance, all right, around the delivery of these kinds of, usually quite big ticket projects. Is there a risk, panel, that as parliaments around the world, as governments around the world bring in local legislation, that provides an unlevel playing field, and that in fact some countries have a statutory framework which is actually very different to others? So somehow, instead of there being a common standard, there is a common standard with a high degree of localization. Is that something that worries you, or is that something that's just normal to be expected, and that you navigate your way around? Any thoughts? Abhaya?
Yeah, so there are, 2-3 parts of the question. First is that if there is a law passed by the parliament and it is not a level playing field for everybody, I think foreign investors will stay away. So it's not a win-win game, and competition will be less expertise. But the second question is law necessary? So if you see 2 countries, I will not name them, who were the first to come out with the BOT law, and they did not do too great. And in fact, many of the countries who are doing good in PPPs, they don't have any law. So frankly, you don't need law, you need a good policy, and you need good practice. Third thing is in terms of, investors, local investors versus foreign investors. I think the more important thing is not law, but many unforeseen or jerky reaction by the government against the foreign investments, and that includes appropriation, nationalization, etc., which is really the killer of the future infrastructure stream for that country.
Thank you so much indeed. Really good answer there. And I love that quote. I just made a note of it, that we don't necessarily need new laws. What we do need is better practice. Okay. And, this kind of almost, if I can say, this building a culture of excellence around public-private partnership is really, what it's all about, and helping people deliver on those promises and remembering, those promises beyond the present moment is such an important part. And VJ makes a really good point, actually, over in the chat, that you have to take a longer-term view, that you have to bring in this consistency of thought to provide that longer term concession is so important. Investor confidence, when the ROI is going to be measured over many years, is such an important part. So governments flip-flopping and changing their mind too frequently is not helpful in these circumstances, where it takes many months of careful consideration before the planning, before the building of the relationships, before the building of the contract, and then the delivery. That time period is usually much longer than your average politician's period in power. So you need that consistency, all right? whichever flavour of politics you come from your country's perspective and your citizens' perspective, you need that continuity, I would say. All right, very good. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, Vijay. Really good point. Very well made. Let's move on, Charlotte, if we can, and we'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've actually got another live question from a viewer that you mentioned earlier on, Wanda Mayo. Although they are public-private partnership frameworks available, what is the success of their implementation?
Well, this is going to be one of those, it depends. It depends kind of answers for Demo. All right, so we've got lots of people nodding kind of in the panel. I think we genuinely have the good, the bad. Are there any ugly PPPs? I don't know. There's definitely, they're all on a spectrum somewhere. Amandeep, start us off, and then we'll hear from Abhaya.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start with, so see, the PPP is not bad. How PPP is implemented, that's a questionable, right? So frameworks could be there. There are very good laws, very good frameworks are there, right? But if those are not in practice, then the success could not be there. As Abhaya gave the example, there are countries who don't have law at the national level or the central level. For example, India don't have a law at the national federal level. It has law at the state levels, but at federal level doesn't have law but the guidelines, the practice. So it does well in PPPs. There are countries who have very, very specific laws, regulation, and they're not doing well PPP. It's a question of practice and intention. As I earlier said that, okay, so PPP is again not a miracle. You need to be very, very careful, do every step very rightfully. Only then it can bring you success. Otherwise, it can be a counterproductive.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Really strong point, very well made indeed. Abhaya, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think frameworks are not law. So frameworks is basically a kind of guidebook, and it's good to know. So always knowledge and science is important along with the practice. If you follow consciously, I think you are likely to do a better job than without knowing about it. So frameworks are important, and following framework is equally or more important.
Thank you very much indeed. I think certainly legislation is rather like standards, that it will always lag behind the present moment. It takes time to formulate. It takes time for the civil service in each country to be able to do the research and ensure that new legislation doesn't contradict previous legislation or break international law or, whatever it happens to be. And so by the time that it becomes effective, often the situation has evolved. And so I agree with you there that often frameworks which have a degree of wiggle room in them and flexibility and the principles of good practice are a better direction of travel if you're going to be able as a nation to commission in a more agile fashion. And I use agility there in the sense of being able to work within the moment. Abhaya, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I also want to give one example is law is something where you say, if I'm not going to behave, I will shoot myself. That's not the way. I mean, and the problem is the laws are so rigid, and when they are made, everybody wants to make it even more rigid because they have, all kind of vicarious ideas. So by the time it comes out, it has no flexibility, as you rightly said.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Indeed. Well, I think we're heading towards a close. So, Charlotte, I think we've got time for one more question to the panel. If you can find one for us, that would be great.
Thanks, Nick. So we've got a question from Irene that's just disappeared. I will be two ticks. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. No problem at all. So I know that we've got quite a stack of questions. So while we're waiting for that one to be brought back in again, if you have submitted a question and we don't get to it today, don't worry. We will roll those questions over into a future PPP event. So, so don't worry too much. Now I can see it on the screen, Charlotte.
Thank you, Nick. So a question from Irene. Are there courses or subject areas that could be beneficial to learn before embarking on being on a public-private partnership certification program?
All right. So this is going to be a lot, really, isn't it? What do you look for? Because many of you are coaching and teaching colleagues as well. You're mentoring others and so on. What are you looking for as those prerequisites, almost? The competencies, capabilities, of individuals who, are embarking on this study journey even before they, jump into the CP3P certification programs. Nyananso.
Okay, so the first thing is interest. So if you just have the interest, we've had people with a background in botany. We've had an HR manager with background in human resources that did very well and passed all the courses. The person is now CP3P certified. And so we've jettisoned the idea of, you have to read a particular course in the university or a polytechnic. But your first background is interest. If you have the interest, and you have the basic education that allows you to understand the technical issues, legal issues, financial issues, then you can be in that class. Because we've been proven wrong a number of times, where somebody that has studied political science is now an expert in PPP. And so, it doesn't have to be a very special area for you to join the certification program. You just need to have the interest and the basic background education. Thank you.
It's so important, isn't it, to engage people with this passion, all right, and this desire to make a contribution. It's really hard to train attitude. You can train knowledge, all right, but you can't necessarily train attitude. And if people bring the right attitude to bear, make a huge difference. Sergei, what do you look for in colleagues who can really build successful careers in this space?
Well, speaking of the certification program, there is no formal prerequisite. You don't have to have a university degree or a degree in management. But from all the experience, when we saw, first of all, let's say the specific category of educational background, but that constantly do really well at those programs, I'd say it's engineers. Maybe there is something driving interest and aptitude, not specific to PPPs, but these are the people, from my experience, who really read the book, who prepare questions, they interrogate the trainer. Probably a very good sort of logical applying of critical logic background. But the one area from the other perspective, which probably any participant could do with some background, I would say, is finance. Because there is an important aspect of the curriculum is project finance, and though the guide does give you a very brief introduction into what the discounted idea of cash flow discounting is, but it would be good if you had a basic course in finance or corporate finance and you're comfortable with those concepts. That would really help.
I certainly agree there. I think it's an area that you're less likely to have come across in your career unless you set out to do so, if that makes sense. So becoming more familiar with finance is a key enabler for people. So if your career so far has been in that space, then you are well placed, of course, to proceed. But if it hasn't, having at least an empathy and an understanding of, that's going to set you in good stance. Yes, really good point. Thank you very much, Sergei. Appreciate that. Abhaya, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that the beginning of PPP was when contractors ran out of money and they wanted existing projects to be paid over a period of time. So the point he made was that engineers make good, PPP specialist is also because if you essentially see the project remains same, it's only financial model and mode of payment to contractors change. And so the next comes the finance. So technical and particularly, people who build plants, linear infrastructure, etc., they remain at advantage.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Well, look, the hour flies by really quickly when we're in the middle of this kind of thing. So thank you very much indeed to everybody. Let's take closing remarks from the panel. So Abhaya, if you can start us off, and then we'll hear from Amandeep.
Yeah, I think PPP is a very interesting area, and if you want to become PPP specialist, do go through APMG course, because that's the only course where you have scientifically available data, information, and the theories. You can also be simultaneously be trying to be a part of PPP team, and above all, I think in a PPP group, you have to manage so many stakeholders. So learn to manage people and be leader.
Thank you very much, and thank you, by the way, for the shout out for the CP3P qualification suite. I would have to agree with you there, but then I am kind of sitting where I'm sitting. Very good, Amandeep, and then let's hear from Sergei.
Yeah, so just for the audience who wanted to become PPP, this is a very, very interesting subject. Interesting in the sense that you will not get bored while doing this kind of a job, whether it's even in the same sector, even the same type of project. So different projects have different challenges. That is one perspective. And definitely, if you are starting into this space, do CP3P course, because that's give the a very broader level and standardized knowledge, because there are many misconceptions in different parts of the world about PPP with different definitions and other things. That's always better to have a standardized knowledge, and just keep interest. It's a passion, as Nick earlier said. It's a passion. If you have passion into infrastructure or public services, you slowly grow up and understand the thing, and believe me, it's very, very interesting job. Thank you.
It really does come across as well, and I think the whole panel here today are exemplars of people who have found their passion in life. And when your work is your passion, it's somehow no longer just work any longer. All right, it makes a big difference. So, thank you very much indeed, Amandeep. Sergei, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Nyananso.
Thank you. I totally would echo what Abhaya and Amandeep said. It is PPPs is an area that generates passion in people who deal with it. I really love the complexity. It's like a chess game. It's so many different interfaces, stakeholders, projects are long, complicated, and there is no right solution. You try to achieve the optimal balance that would suit the project, different parties. And I'd certainly would also join the advice to take the certified course, and I would add to it that even if you are fully certified PPP professional, you are not done learning. I mean, stuff on PPPs, almost every day you have new documents, new regulations, new amazing projects to new instruments. So I would say this community aspect is quite important. Stay connected with professionals, share your perspectives. Every class we teach, every participant of the course is someone who contributes. If they've developed projects, if they consult projects, we are very eager to listen from them. So it's a very much two-way road, and welcome to the club if you are not in it yet.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that is what is fascinating. I think you would not be involved in this if you didn't care and you weren't passionate about solving problems and solving real problems and leaving a legacy which is beyond the present moment. The people who set out. So I always think about, the folks that decided that they were going to plant an arboretum. They would never, in their lifetime, they will never see the trees mature from the saplings through to, provide the canopy that they had imagined. But they do it, and they do it because of that legacy concept, and it's such a fascinating area working in PPPs, because the legacy of your work will live way beyond our lifetimes and affect, such a large number of lives around the world. So thank you very much indeed. I agree with that, Sergei. Excellent answer. Nyananso, final thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Charlotte.
Okay, so becoming a PPP specialist, the barriers have been lowered, in the recent times because of technology. So one, you can get the materials from the APMG certification program. They are freely available, so you can actually get the materials and go through them. Two, you can also join online courses and also learn, to become a specialist, and you can get your certification as well. But more importantly, practice. You must put what you've learned in practice. Practice, because no two projects are the same. They're always very unique. And that's the interesting part of PPPs. When you're applying, you learn new things and you keep applying and you keep improving yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Excellent advice there. And if you've not done so already, do visit the APMG International website. You'll see the event page listed. And there's a little link for each of the panelists that takes you to their LinkedIn profile. So if you're watching on LinkedIn today and you want to connect with the panelists, then by all means, on a professional basis, please don't try and sell them anything, but on a professional basis, do connect with them and with myself, all right, on LinkedIn. We're always happy, to accept that kind of connection, all right, and we'll do what we can to help you on your journey. Charlotte, final thoughts on today's episode?
Thanks, Nick, and thank you to our panel and to our live viewers for all the excellent questions and excellent answers, information that's been provided through today's show.
Absolutely right. It has been truly amazing. Thank you very much indeed, panel. I will echo that as well. Thank you to our producers who are over online, of course. Very good. Well, let's kind of move on. Now, over on the APMG website, you can find answers to more than 1,500 questions. It's very much a comprehensive resource. It's totally free. And it connects you, as I mentioned, with 170 experts around the world. Now, we're approaching very shortly, I think, around 13,000 people who have taken the CP3P qualification. So if you're one of those, it would be great to have a bit of a shout out from you to share. Like, share and subscribe, please, to the video that we host on our YouTube channel, because it will help other people who are earlier in their career journey, to discover this content and get on board with it. So please do take a moment to do that. It doesn't cost you anything. And of course, it really will help out the channel and help other people find us. Looking forward, on Monday, the 20th of March, we're going to be looking at how to become a change leader. Now, we often talk about managing change, but how do you actually lead change and lead organizations through a change process? And is leadership even something that you want to do? Not everybody does, of course, want that kind of role, but sometimes in our careers, we're not expecting to lead something, and then we need to. So it's a really good one to tune into. That starts at 8 o'clock GMT UK time on Monday, the 20th of March. For those of you who are in the US and you've already changed your time zone, then actually it's a little friendlier time for you, but it's still nighttime, I guess. Anyway, moving on, next Friday on the 24th, we're going to be looking at the project management office specialist role. So PMOs do amazing work around the world at building that competency and capability and getting things done in a timely fashion and, actually delivering on the promises that are made. So a really good one to tune in for. So we'll look forward to both of those episodes next week. Subscribe to the show, and we'll send you a personal summary, of course, of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye now.